You know, after 60 years of living, you've earned something precious, the wisdom to know what you deserve. You've raised families, built careers, weathered storms, and emerged stronger. And if you're opening your heart to companionship again, whether after loss, divorce, or simply because you're ready, you deserve a relationship that adds joy to your life, not complications. But here's what I've learned from countless women in our community. Sometimes, when we're lonely, or when someone shows us attention after a long time alone, we overlook warning signs we would have caught immediately when we were younger. We make excuses. We think, well, at our age, everyone has baggage, or maybe I'm being too picky. Let me be clear, having standards isn't being picky. It's called self-respect. Today, I'm sharing 5 absolute deal breakers, behaviors that should have you walking away without a second thought. These aren't minor annoyances or quirks you can learn to live with. These are patterns that will erode your peace, your independence, and the beautiful life you've worked so hard to build. I wish someone had told my friend Margaret about these red flags before she spent 2 years with a man who slowly dimmed her light. Or my sister's neighbor Dorothy, who nearly lost her financial security because she ignored the warning signs. The 5 things we're discussing today are controlling behavior, financial manipulation, disrespect toward you or your loved ones, emotional unavailability, and refusing to integrate you into his life. Let's start with the first one, and this is crucial because it often disguises itself as care and concern. I'm talking about controlling behavior, and it can be far more subtle than you might think. When Robert first started dating Linda, a vibrant 64-year-old from our community, she thought his attentiveness was romantic. He'd call 3 times a day just to hear her voice. He wanted to know her schedule so we can plan our time together. He suggested she didn't need to attend her weekly bridge game anymore because wouldn't you rather spend that time with me? Within 6 months, Linda had stopped seeing her daughter as often, quit her book club, and Robert had somehow become a joint account holder on her checking account. Just to help with bills, honey. That's what control looks like at our age. It doesn't usually start with shouting or obvious dominance. It starts with someone who seems wonderfully interested in every detail of your life. Here's what you need to watch for. Does he get upset when you make plans without consulting him first? Does he question why you need to spend time with your friends or adult children? Does he offer unsolicited opinions about your spending, even though you've managed your finances independently for decades? Does he suggest you're too old or too fragile for activities you've always enjoyed? A controlling man will often frame his behavior as protection. I just worry about you driving at night. Those friends of yours are a bad influence. Let me handle the money. You shouldn't stress about these things at your age. But here's the truth. A man who truly cares about you wants to see you thrive, not shrink. He celebrates your independence, not chips away at it. The long-term damage is real. I've watched confident, capable women become shadows of themselves, second-guessing every decision, asking permission for things they've done independently their entire adult lives. Your self-esteem, which you've spent 60-plus years building, can erode faster than you'd imagine when someone constantly questions your judgment and choices. Margaret, the friend I mentioned earlier, told me something that still breaks my heart. I stopped recognizing myself. I'd survived raising 3 kids alone, built a successful career, traveled solo through Europe, but suddenly I couldn't decide what to make for dinner without anxiety about whether he'd approve. The most insidious part: controllers isolate you systematically, so when you finally realize what's happening, you feel you have no one to turn to. Your support system has been carefully pruned away. If a man in your life is exhibiting these behaviors, understand this: it will not get better. Control only tightens over time. Now, closely related to control is another red flag that's absolutely critical to recognize, and this one often flies under the radar because we're taught to be understanding and patient. I'm talking about a man who consistently makes promises he never keeps. Let me tell you about Patricia. She met David at a community theater production. He was charming, attentive, and full of plans. "I'll take you to that new restaurant everyone's talking about. We'll spend a weekend at my daughter's lake house. You'll love it." I'm gonna fix that loose railing on your porch this Saturday. Saturday came and went. The restaurant reservation never materialized. The lake house weekend was postponed 3 times, then never mentioned again. The railing, still loose 6 months later. Now, we all forget things occasionally. Life happens. Someone gets sick, an emergency arises, plans genuinely need to change. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a pattern. A man who consistently says one thing and does another, who makes promises easily but follows through rarely, who always has an excuse ready, and they're often good excuses, believable ones. That's what makes this behavior so difficult to identify early on. Here's why this matters so much at our age. We don't have time to waste on empty words. A broken promise isn't just an inconvenience, it's a sign of fundamental disrespect. When someone repeatedly fails to keep their word to you, they're telling you that you're not a priority, that your time, your feelings, your expectations don't carry enough weight to influence their behavior. Patricia kept making excuses for David. He's busy with his grandkids. His back was bothering him. He's not good at planning. But here's what she finally realized. He managed to show up for things that mattered to him. His golf games, his poker nights, his own doctor's appointments. The emotional toll of this pattern is exhausting. You start each promise with hope, then brace yourself for disappointment. You lower your expectations. You stop believing in plans until they actually happen. You begin to feel foolish for expecting him to follow through. That constant cycle of hope and letdown chips away at your peace of mind and trust. Once eroded by broken promises, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Because trust isn't just about big things like fidelity, it's built in the small, daily moments of someone doing what they said they'd do. Here's how to identify this early. Pay attention in the first few months. Does he consistently follow through on small promises? If he says he'll call Tuesday evening, does he? If he offers to bring something to your place, does it arrive? Don't dismiss these small failures as unimportant. They're actually the most telling indicators of future behavior. If you're already involved with an empty promise keeper, address it directly. Once, say clearly, I've noticed you often commit to things that don't happen. That pattern doesn't work for me. I need reliability. His response will tell you everything. A man of character will acknowledge the problem and change his behavior. An empty promise keeper will make another promise about keeping promises, then break that one too. Patricia eventually ended things with David. She told me, I realized I felt lonelier with him than I did before we met. At least when I was alone, I wasn't constantly disappointed. Don't settle for words without action. At this stage of life, you deserve someone whose promises mean something. But unreliability isn't the only way a man can leave you feeling alone in a relationship. Sometimes you can spend hours with someone and still feel like you're talking to a wall. That brings us to another critical warning sign. Men who are emotionally unavailable, who keep you at arm's length even when they're sitting right beside you. Deal breaker number 3, the emotionally unavailable man. Margaret met Richard at a community art class. He was charming, attentive in public, always ready with a compliment about her paintings. But 3 months in, she realized something troubling. She knew almost nothing real about him. Not what made him sad, what he feared, what he dreamed about. Conversations stayed surface level. Weather and news, the quality of the restaurant food. Whenever she tried to go deeper, he'd change the subject or make a joke. Emotional unavailability isn't always obvious. These men don't announce, I can't connect with you emotionally. Instead, they show you through their patterns. They deflect when you ask how they're feeling. They withdraw when conversations turn vulnerable. They're physically present but emotionally absent. You're sitting across from them, but it feels like talking to someone behind glass. Watch for these signs. He shares facts about his life, but never his feelings about those facts. He's uncomfortable when you express emotion. He might minimize your feelings or quickly try to fix the problem rather than simply listening. He avoids discussions about the relationship's future. When conflict arises, he shuts down or leaves rather than working through it. He struggles with empathy. When you're upset, he seems annoyed or inconvenienced rather than concerned. This often shows up in daily life in subtle ways. You have a difficult day and need to talk. He listens for 2 minutes, then turns on the television. You try to discuss something that hurt your feelings. He says, "You're too sensitive." Or, "That's just how I am." You want to know where the relationship is heading. He says, "Let's just see what happens," month after month. You share something meaningful about your past. He responds with something superficial or immediately talks about himself. Sometimes emotional unavailability looks like inconsistency. He's warm and open one day, distant and cold the next. You never know which version you're getting. That unpredictability keeps you off balance, always trying to earn back the connection that should be freely given. Now, there are reasons men become emotionally unavailable: past trauma, difficult divorces, loss, years of suppressing feelings because they were taught that's what men do. And yes, that deserves compassion. But here's what you need to understand: his emotional unavailability is not your project to fix. Margaret spent months trying different approaches, being more patient, asking better questions, creating safe spaces for Richard to open up. She read books about helping emotionally closed men. She made excuses. He had a cold mother. His ex-wife hurt him. He's from a generation that doesn't talk about feelings. But emotional availability isn't something you can create in another person through the right combination of patience and technique. He has to want to do that work himself. And if he's made it to his 60s without developing emotional intimacy skills, and he's not actively working on it now, he's telling you who he is. The cost of staying with an emotionally unavailable man is profound. You become lonely inside the relationship. You stop sharing your real self because there's no one truly receiving it. You shrink your emotional world to match his comfort level. You grieve the deep connection you wanted while going through the motions of companionship. If you're dating someone new, test for emotional availability early. Share something moderately personal and see how he responds. Express a need and see if he can meet it. Discuss a minor concern about the relationship and watch whether he engages or deflects. His capacity for emotional intimacy will show itself if you pay attention. Margaret finally ended things with Richard when she realized she felt more connected talking to her sister on the phone than sitting next to him on the couch. She told me, "I don't want to spend my remaining years translating silence and guessing at feelings. I want someone who shows up emotionally, not just physically." You deserve emotional partnership, not emotional isolation with company. But sometimes the problem isn't what a man withholds, it's what he constantly dishes out. Which brings us to the next warning sign: men who criticize relentlessly, who make you feel like nothing you do is ever quite good enough. Deal breaker number 4, the perpetual critic. Barbara met Tom at a community art class. He seemed cultured, attentive, full of opinions about everything from paintings to politics. She found his confidence attractive. But within weeks, that confidence revealed its shadow side. "You're wearing that to dinner? You really should try a different hairstyle, something more modern. I wouldn't have phrased it that way if I were you. You're overcooking the chicken again." Small comments, constant corrections, a steady drip of disapproval that left her second-guessing everything. Here's what constant criticism does: it erodes your sense of self from the inside out. You start monitoring yourself through his eyes. Before you speak, you wonder if he'll think you sound foolish. Before you dress, you anticipate his reaction. You're no longer living your life, you're performing for an audience of one who's never satisfied with the show. And it takes a toll on your mental health. Studies show that ongoing criticism triggers the same stress response as physical threat. Your cortisol levels rise, your confidence plummets. Some women develop anxiety, depression, even physical symptoms. All because they're living under a microscope held by someone who only sees flaws. Now, let's be clear about something important. There's a world of difference between constructive feedback and nitpicking. Constructive feedback is specific, kind, and offered with your best interest at heart. "Hey, you mentioned wanting to improve your photography. Would you like some tips I learned?" That's support. Criticism is different. It's about control, not care. It focuses on what's wrong with you, not how to solve a specific problem together. And here's the key: look at the intent. Is he trying to help you grow, or is he trying to make you smaller? Barbara started noticing patterns. Tom's criticisms often came when she was feeling good about herself. When she wore an outfit she loved, he'd find fault. When she shared an accomplishment, he'd point out what she could have done better. When she expressed an opinion confidently, he'd correct her facts. His criticism wasn't about improvement, it was about keeping her off balance and keeping himself superior. The criticism comes in two forms. There's the overt kind: direct insults, harsh judgments, public embarrassment. You're too sensitive. That's a stupid idea. You're not making any sense. Those hurt, but at least you can identify them. Then there's the subtle kind, and this is often more damaging because it makes you doubt your own perception. The heavy sigh when you're talking. The eye roll. The "I'm just trying to help" followed by a list of your inadequacies. The jokes at your expense that aren't quite jokes. "I'm just being honest," he says, as if cruelty and honesty are the same thing. So how do you respond? First, trust your gut. If interactions with him leave you feeling diminished, that's data. Second, name it directly. When you comment on my appearance that way, I feel criticized, not supported. Watch his response. Does he apologize and adjust? Or does he defend, deflect, tell you you're too sensitive? If it's a pattern, and with perpetual critics it always is, you're looking at emotional abuse. Not all abuse is loud. Some of it whispers constantly that you're not enough. Barbara finally told Tom she was done. He was shocked. "I was only trying to help you be your best self," he said. She replied, "I already am my best self. You just couldn't see it." You don't need someone who treats you like a renovation project. But criticism isn't the only way men try to maintain control. Sometimes they do it by refusing to bend at all, by making every decision a battle where only their way matters. Let's talk about the men who've never learned that relationships require give and take. Here's the thing about compromise. It's not about losing. It's about two people building something together that neither could build alone. Margaret learned this the hard way. She met David at a community theater group. He was charming, confident, and seemed to have strong opinions about everything. At first she found it attractive, a man who knew what he wanted. But 6 months in, she realized something troubling. Every single decision in their relationship went his way. Where they ate dinner, always his choice. Which friends they spent time with, his friends. How they spent weekends, his activities. When she suggested a compromise, "How about we try the restaurant I mentioned, and next week we'll go to your favorite place?" He'd agree in principle but never follow through. Or he'd sigh heavily, making her feel guilty for even asking. "Fine, if it's that important to you," he'd say, as if her preferences were unreasonable burdens. This is what a man who won't compromise looks like. He might not yell or demand. He might simply ignore your suggestions, forget your preferences, or make you feel selfish for having needs at all. Every disagreement becomes a negotiation. You lose. Real compromise means both people adjust. You want to spend Christmas with your daughter. He wants to stay home. A compromise isn't him grudgingly going for an hour while making everyone miserable. It's genuinely finding a solution. Maybe Christmas Eve with family, Christmas Day quiet together. Both people give something. Both people gain something. Watch how he handles small disagreements first. You prefer the window open at night. He prefers it closed. Does he explore solutions? A fan, different blankets, opening it partway? Or does he simply close it and consider the matter settled? The small things reveal the pattern. Susan noticed her partner Richard had a phrase he used constantly. "That doesn't make sense." Whenever she expressed a preference different from his, that's what she heard. She wanted to downsize to a smaller place. "That doesn't make sense." She wanted to take a painting class. "That doesn't make sense." Her feelings, her desires, her perspective, none of it made sense to him because it wasn't what he wanted. A man who won't compromise sees relationships as hierarchies, not partnerships. His needs are reasonable, yours are negotiable. His time is valuable, yours is flexible. His comfort matters, yours is optional. Here's your test. Bring up something that matters to you but differs from his preference. Watch what happens. Does he get curious about your perspective? Does he ask questions? Does he offer genuine alternatives? Or does he shut down, dismiss, or simply proceed as if you never spoke? You've lived over 60 years. You've earned the right to a voice in your own relationship. If he can't bend, walk away. Partnership requires two people, willing to meet in the middle. Now let's bring this all together, because these 5 patterns, they're not just red flags. They're your roadmap to protecting the beautiful life you've built. Let's recap what we've covered today, because knowledge is your armor. First, never accept a man who disrespects your independence. If he questions your spending, monitors your schedule, or makes you feel guilty for time with friends, that's not love, that's control. Second, reject anyone who dismisses your feelings. When your emotions are met with "you're overreacting" or "you're too sensitive," he's telling you his comfort matters more than your reality. Third, walk away from the man who criticizes your appearance. You've earned every line, every gray hair, every change. If he comments on your weight, compares you to younger women, or suggests you fix yourself, he doesn't see your value. Fourth, refuse the man who isolates you from loved ones. If he creates drama around your family visits, complains about your friendships, or makes you choose between him and others, he's building a cage. And fifth, don't settle for someone who won't compromise. If every decision defaults to his preference and your needs are always negotiable, that's not partnership. Here's what I want you to remember. You are not too old, too set in your ways, or too difficult. You're experienced enough to recognize what you won't tolerate anymore. That's wisdom, not pickiness. Being alone is not the worst outcome. Being with someone who diminishes you is. If you're currently in a relationship that fits these patterns, consider reaching out to a therapist or joining a support group. Organizations like ARP offer relationship resources specifically for our age group. You're not alone in this. And if you're single, don't let loneliness make you accept less than you deserve. The right person will respect the woman you are today, not the younger version he wishes you still were. You've built a life. Protect it fiercely.